Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning. Welcome to the second installment of our legislative prep session webinar series, Education Challenges and Solutions. I want to first start off and thank our amazing, and I cannot say this enough, amazing partners, Education Commission of the States, the National Association of State Boards of Education, and the National Conference of State Legislators, who, without all of their collaboration and hard work, this would not be possible. Our goal in envisioning this webinar series was to take central challenges that we knew existed across the country and provide a quick webinar series that would allow, in preparation for the next legislative session in 2025, a chance to dig into the research to find out what works to address those challenges, and then hear from states actually taking on those challenges and tackling those problems. On Tuesday, our kickoff webinar was about building and retaining the teacher workforce. We heard from Mississippi and New York about how they were approaching specifically retaining practicing teachers, and this was through compensation, national board certification, incentive and support, early career mentoring and coaching, professional learning, and teacher leadership. And I encourage you to go check out the recording if that's up and really hear from those states. There was a lot of great discussion about those policies. Today, we're going to talk about long-term solutions to teacher shortages, and we're going to look primarily at high retention pathways into the profession and expanding access to those pathways through financial incentives and investment. Next week, my amazing colleagues will be leading a session on Tuesday about eliminating chronic absence, and they'll be joined by Attendance Works and colleagues from West Virginia and New Mexico. And then finally, we will wrap up the series on Thursday, where we will look at some emerging trends in education finance. And so please, if all of this is of interest, we encourage you to come check them out. And if you can't make it in person, we also encourage you to check out the recordings when those are posted online. Now, for this particular webinar, I also want to thank three other partners in this work. First, our Ed Prep Lab is a network of leading edge educator preparation programs from across the country who are advancing preparation practices and models in alignment with the most up-to-date research on how people learn and develop, the science, learning, and development. And we also want to thank the Teacher Licensure Collaborative, a network of states working to build policy systems that can support that type of preparation through teacher licensure policies and preparation program approval systems. And finally, a big shout out to the Pathways Alliance, an Uncommon coalition of leading education organizations dedicated to supporting and implementing diverse and inclusive educator preparation pipelines, which includes teacher residency programs, which will be the main focus of today's conversation as well. So as we get going, we're going to start with a look at the research on the nature of teacher shortages and the importance of preparation and high retention pathways when it comes to building and retaining the teacher workforce. Then we're going to look more closely at the research on teacher residencies and their impact on supporting efforts to address shortages and increase access to quality preparation. And then I'm going to close this portion with a look at some of the trends in state policy that we've seen recently as states are working to seed and grow teacher residencies. And then I'm going to shut up and we're going to hear from some of the experts, and we'll hear from two states, California and Texas, about how they have approached building strong residency systems. And one last thing as we jump in is I want to take a minute to remind ourselves why this conversation about high quality and affordable high retention pathways into education is so important. First, we know that teacher certification, teacher experience, and stability matter for student achievement, and we have seen that borne out in large-scale studies in New York, North Carolina, and most recently, California. Research also indicates that teachers without full preparation leave at 2 to 3 times the rate of fully prepared teachers, creating that leaky bucket, revolving door, pick your metaphor, that contributes to shortages and undermines school improvement efforts. And this is a core equity issue because these characteristics of teachers are inequitably distributed, and that's unfortunately a pattern we've seen borne out over decades in the research. In addition, we also know from the research that all students benefit from a racially diverse teacher workforce. The diversity of the teacher workforce matters, and we've seen several studies have found improved academic outcomes for students of color, including increases in math and reading scores and graduation rates. Students of color are less likely to be chronically absent or to be suspended when they have teachers of color. And some research suggests that teachers of color may experience greater satisfaction in schools with more diverse faculty. So greater staff diversity might help decrease turnover rates for teachers of color and improve school stability for students. But despite this widespread evidence base, we continue to struggle both with increasing the racial diversity of the teaching profession and with widespread shortages across the country. Earlier this year, my colleagues at LPI did a scan of 50 states plus District of Columbia to see what the most recent state-level data indicates about shortages. The study found that at least 400,000 positions were unfilled or filled with teachers not fully certified. And I want to stress that's an undercount because not all states report this data or do not report complete data. That's at least 1 in 8 teaching positions nationally, affecting at least 6 million children, likely more. There are a number of drivers of shortages, including a shrinking teacher pipeline. But a key driver of shortages is teacher attrition, or teachers leaving the profession often well before they hit retirement age. As we saw earlier, and many other studies have confirmed this, attrition is strongly related to the preparation that teachers receive. But unfortunately, far too many candidates cannot afford the kind of high-quality preparation that enables them to come into the profession with the greatest likelihood of success. Many are coming in on emergency-style permits or no credential at all and are not yet fully certified. In addition, my colleagues recently completed an analysis of student debt. Their study analyzed new loan variables included in U.S. Department of Education's National Teacher and Principal Survey of 2020-2021. The study provides a national look, but they are also included state-specific information on student loans, second jobs outside the classroom, and several other variables on an interactive map. The prospect of accumulating student loans could deter teacher candidates from pursuing comprehensive pre-service preparation, which is higher in quality but may take longer to complete and thus incur greater costs. In some cases, costs dissuade potential candidates from pursuing teaching as a career. And overall, student loans and debt repayment have the potential to exacerbate job-related stress. We found that 2.1 million teachers have borrowed for their education, and that's over 60% of all full-time public school teachers. We also know that 1.3 are still in repayment, and we also know that 400,000 still owe their entire balance. The ongoing debt burden falls hardest on Black teachers, as well as Latino and Native American, Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander teachers, and multiracial teachers. More than 30% of Black teachers still owe all of their student loans, and almost 60% owe at least some of their loans. Preparation costs, including whether you can earn a salary, pay the bills while doing a residency or student teaching, and learning alongside an expert mentor teacher, which we know is so central to your success as a future teacher, is a key driver of why candidates might choose to enter teaching through an alternative certification program or an emergency-style permit. Nationally, more than twice as many teachers of color are certified via an alternative pathway, 25%, as white teachers at about 12%. Go to the next slide here. So a key policy question for state and system leaders to think about is how to broaden access to high quality, affordable preparation. Research points to the key drivers of shortages, but there's also a growing evidence base on policy strategies to address them. This includes what we call high retention pathways into teaching through pathways such as teacher residencies and grow your own models, as well as a newer strategy, registered apprenticeships into teaching. Note, there are important similarities and overlap in these strategies, but with the bulk of research being about teacher residencies, that is where we will spend the majority of our time talking today and when we look at state policy. States can also cover most or all of the cost of teacher preparation in exchange for a commitment to teach in a high-need field or school, including rural schools, by investing in service scholarships or loan forgiveness programs. The notion that if you will teach, we will pay for your education can be a powerful recruitment and retention tool. And as I mentioned, 37% of teachers nationally still carry student loan debt, so this could be a powerful strategy to retain the existing teacher workforce. All of these strategies serve to broaden access to preparation and reduce barriers to entry, especially financial ones, as opposed to lowering standards for teachers, which can often seem like an easy fix to solving teacher shortages. A key strategy that we're looking at today is the teacher residency, a model that is modeled after medical residencies. They provide candidates with the opportunity to co-teach alongside an expert mentor teacher for a full year of residency, taking tightly integrated coursework in a program co-designed in a partnership between the local district partner and the educator preparation program. These programs are typically lower cost or free to candidates and often come with a stipend in exchange for a service commitment to work in the sponsoring district. So they're getting that preparation in the school they hope to go work in. A growing body of research on teacher residencies finds that residencies prepare effective teachers who are more likely to be retained in the high-need districts where they serve, and that they increase the diversity of educator workforce. I'm going to share some findings from an updated literature review my colleague Julie Fitz completed earlier this year, looking at the research on teacher residencies and their impact on teacher effectiveness, support for retaining teachers, and their ability to address critical staffing needs in schools and subject areas. Unlike alternative certification pathways that place teachers in classrooms before they have completed their training for teaching, the research suggests that residencies represent high-quality preparation options that graduate day one ready educators. First off, studies where residency graduates are surveyed about the quality of their preparation, they tend to respond very positively and indicate that they feel well prepared to teach, which self-efficacy is a key piece of your feeling that you're doing a good job and that you will be retained in the classroom. Studies where residency graduates are surveyed about the quality of their preparation tend to respond very positively. Their perceptions are affirmed by hiring principals who report that residency teachers tend to be more effective than other novice teachers, likely due to the extensive clinical experience they received during their residency year. And finally, student outcomes. The evidence we have, though limited, suggests that students taught by residency graduates tend to perform as well or better than students taught by other novice teachers. While more research in this area would be helpful, these findings are nonetheless promising indicators that students are well served by residency-prepared educators. The studies we reviewed provided further confirmation that residency-prepared teachers tend to remain in teaching at higher rates than other novice teachers in their districts. Of the studies we reviewed that reported retention outcomes, retention ranged from 80% to 95% after 3 years. One multi-district study found that residency retention was 10 percentage points higher than retention for teachers from other pathways. So these pathways show promise for closing the revolving door of teachers, or that leaky bucket, or whatever other metaphor you might have chosen way back. Now, finally, critical staffing needs. We also find evidence that residency-prepared teachers both fill shortages in high-need schools and subject areas and tend to be more diverse than teachers prepared through traditional preparation programs. Data from the National Center for Teacher Residencies, NCTR, which partners with 47 residency programs nationwide, helps illustrate this tendency. Out of the over 1,600 graduates of NCTR-partnered programs in 2021-2022, 25% taught in math, science, or technology fields, 18% specialized in teaching English learners, 25% specialized in special education, all of which are credentialing areas where districts have persistent shortages. Furthermore, 83% were hired in a Title I school, meaning they were serving students from low-income families, which tend to be disproportionately taught by uncertified and inexperienced teachers. In terms of candidate diversity, NCTR reports that over 2,200 residents who were enrolled at partner programs during the 2022-2023 school year, 69% identified as a person of color, with 33% who identified as Black or African American, and 28% who identified as Hispanic or Latino. Notably, since we last reviewed NCTR data in 2016 when we did an initial research review of teacher residencies, both the percentage of graduates working in high-need staffing areas and the percentage of residents who identify as persons of color have grown quite significantly. So we see a real increase in the efficacy of teacher residencies to tackle critical staffing needs. Now I want to shift to looking at trends in states' policy support before we hand it over to our panel. Learning Policy Institute released a report back in July of this year that synthesizes trends from across 12 different states. And here's a quick look at the states we looked at. There's a lot of different policy mechanisms through which states support residencies. 5 states highlighted in this report have enacted legislative language to codify financial support and specific requirements for residency programs, and they can serve as models if you are looking for legislative language or places to see how other states have approached it. While 6 have sought to launch programs through state agencies, including Mississippi, Montana, and Texas, who we'll hear from today. We're going to hear from 2 states, California and Texas, when we shift to the panel in a moment, but I want to talk a little bit about some of the trends we saw in these different state policy approaches. First, we know that states have sought to support partnerships. States have looked to require local education agencies, districts, to partner with state-approved educator preparation programs. And some states, including California, Indiana, and Pennsylvania, have provided funding to support residency partnership capacity building and planning through planning grants. California and Texas, as we'll hear from soon, have also invested in the operation of residencies and these partnerships, lending a potential support for further sustainability. New Mexico's design includes $50,000 per program for a residency program coordinator at each state-approved teacher residency program. Nearly all the states highlighted in this report require that the residency provide financial support to residents. Again, going back to supporting efforts to undercut or underwrite the debt burden that candidates experience. Though the type, size, and flexibility of that financial support varies widely by state. Residency programs often allow for residents to take on part-time roles as part of the residency, and state policy has helped to support that as well. This can happen as substitutes, paraeducators, expanded learning staff, and tutors. And for example, residency policy in West Virginia allows residents to substitute teach in their host school for up to 1 day per week. When thoughtfully designed, differentiated staffing models can help provide a more seamless experience for the students whom residents serve in those multiple capacities, meet critical school staffing needs, and enhance residents' learning opportunities. In addition to Texas, who we're going to hear from shortly, Delaware is also in the process of implementing a focus on differentiated staffing across their ongoing state residency efforts. Policy design often concludes support for capacity building and/or technical assistance. Both California and Texas have funded technical assistance for residency programs across the state, and Texas is also establishing a regional technical assistance centers, which we'll hear more about shortly. State education agencies like Montana's Office of Public Instruction and West Virginia's Department of Education have both played active roles in supporting and guiding programs as they work to ramp up participation in their state residency efforts. And ultimately, policy design can also support financial sustainability. And finally, I want to just pay a quick word to, we know states are pursuing other grow your own strategies, and these are some of the kind of ways that grow your own programs might differentiate from residencies, though there is a lot of overlap when it comes to how residencies approach recruiting candidates from within the community as well, and providing more and direct and individualized supports to move candidates through coursework. And also, we know there's continued interest in registered teaching apprenticeships, where, again, the financial incentives and paying candidates, the on-the-job mentorship and related instruction are all tightly connected to the design of residencies that we've seen as well. Finally, a last piece before we kind of wrap here. I want to put a mention of one last often overlooked element of these policies, which is the need for data systems and evaluation to track the impact of these policies and programs, including in ways that allow apples to apples comparison between these and other pathways over the long term on factors like program completion, hiring into high-need schools, and retention and effectiveness. This is a key piece of something we'll hear about when we hear from Texas and California about how evaluating and tracking these impacts can also help you continue to make the case for this type of work over time. So without further ado, I'm going to invite our panelists to join the discussion. I'm going to introduce them here in just a moment and get up. There we go. So first, I want to introduce our moderator, Laverne Srinivasan, who's the Vice President of National Program and Program Director of Education at the Carnegie Corporation. Then we're also joined by Kelvie Oser, the Deputy Commissioner of Education and Systems Support at the Texas Education Agency. Mary Vixie Sandy joins us as the Executive Director from the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing. And finally, we're joined by Dr. Clifton Tanabe, the College of Education Dean at the University of Texas at El Paso. So I am going to hand it over to Laverne, and thank you all very much.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it. And I'm so excited to be in conversation with these three incredible leaders. I'm going to start us off with a question that I'll direct to all of the panelists. Can you help the audience understand some of the challenges your state or region has faced with the educator workforce, and in particular, how your teacher residency work has been a key strategy in tackling those challenges? So I'm going to start with Deputy Commissioner Oser, and then I'll ask you to pass it over to Dr. Tanabe, and then finally to Dr. Vixie Sandy from California.
Thank you. And first, just want to say thank you for having me today and hosting this incredible panel on this topic. So in Texas, we have seen some similar issues with the teacher workforce that we just heard about in Ryan's presentation related to teacher attrition in particular, which we've seen really spike after COVID, and that causing an increase in the need for districts to hire new teachers into the profession. So this, teachers leaving the profession, increasing new teacher hiring, and those new teachers actually coming in with less or no preparation. One of the things that makes Texas unique is the flexibilities we have related to preparation and certification in the state, which has meant that over time, we've seen an increasing percentage of our teachers being prepared through alternative certification programs. Many times those programs do not have any or have very minimal pre-service teaching practice prior to teachers entering the profession. However, what we've seen, particularly in just the last couple of years, is that percentage of teachers are coming in not just with not going through traditional preparation programs, but actually having no certification at all. So also not even joining alternative certification programs. This has been up to 34% of our new teachers hired just this last year had no certification at all and are not currently going through a preparation program. We think that, this is due to a number of factors, one of which is just the increasing demand for new teachers from districts, as well as the decreasing supply of teachers coming from traditional and alternative certification programs, but also some of the barriers to entry into traditional and alternative certification programs, because what we see is that, districts are hiring uncertified teachers and not even requiring them then to go into an alternative certification program, which could be due to several reasons. One is cost of these programs to the candidates. Another one could be certification exam barriers to entering these programs. And, a lack of value from districts and from candidates to participate in the programs if they are able to be hired and receive a full salary without attending the preparation programs. And just the level of flexibility within our state through districts of innovation and other waivers that districts have to meet this need without going through preparation programs. So, the reasons why we looked at residency programs as a key solution to these problems and to the broader teacher workforce landscape in Texas is really, for several reasons. One is that in 2022, Governor Abbott launched the Teacher Vacancy Task Force that really looked at this larger issue and came up with multiple solutions, knowing that this really needs to be a multi-pronged strategy that includes compensation, training and support, and working conditions. But within training and support, that group really focused in on residencies as being the way to really increase the quality for preparation programs to get to higher outcomes for both teachers and students. And we were able to really look at the incredible work of many pilot programs across our state who had already been working towards building residency programs, launching these programs. So I know Dr. Shnabi is going to speak about the UTEP program, who was an early adopter creation of pilot residency programs and scaling those residency programs in El Paso. And so we could learn from those programs across the state as well as the national research and see the outcomes that the residency programs were having both on teacher retention and on student outcomes. And so through looking at that data and the teacher vacancy task force recommendations, and through the influx of ESSER funding to address these critical COVID pandemic needs, we were able to invest in residencies as one of those key strategies.
Terrific. So Dr. Ozer, thank you for that. And Dr. Tanabe, that's a nice segue into some more specific insights from you. Oh, you're on mute, Dr. Tanabe.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to echo everything Deputy Commissioner Ozer said. Kelby, it's great to see you again. Maybe add a little bit of local context. El Paso is a binational, bicultural city on the U.S.-Mexico border. In far west Texas, it's home to around 164,000 PK-12 students, more than 90% of whom are Hispanic, 75% are economically disadvantaged, 25 to 30% are emergent bilingual. And in that context, the composition of the UTEP teacher preparation program and the residency, the program that we designed to respond to teacher shortages and the needs in our community, reflects that of the region. Nearly 50% of our students are first generation, and nearly 70% identify as bilingual. Now, these factors, this context, highlights both the challenges and the strengths we're working with here in El Paso to drive a program that develops the absolute highest quality teachers with a day one ready skill set to serve the learning needs of the students in our region. Perhaps the single most important strategy we have leveraged in doing this work, focused on our teacher residency, has been in taking a collective impact and education pipeline approach. And by that, I mean that we work intentionally and consistently to build and maintain communities of practice at different levels, to gain insights from each other, to share data, to develop region-wide communication structures and goal setting, and to drive engagement and support. One of these bodies is a region-wide teacher pipeline task force. This group is made up of school district leaders, local, state, and national foundation representatives, folks from our regional community college and UTEP, and other community-based organizations. In addition to this region-wide body, we implemented what we call shared governance structures with each of our district partners, where leaders and faculty from our teacher preparation program meet quarterly with school district leaders to share and make data-based decisions, discuss processes, and analyze what is working and what needs improvement. It's a truth-based space where we get to both the problems and the strengths of what we're trying to do. The power of this focus on a region-wide pipeline with robust collective engagement cannot be overstated. Admittedly, it takes work to pull this together, strategic and consistent effort, but the return on that investment, in our case, has been profound and tangible. And if you stick to it, that starts to gain momentum, and we've begun to see that in the work that we've done here in El Paso.
Terrific. Thank you so much for giving that additional insight, Dr. Tanabe. Let's turn to Dr. Vixie Sandy, and you're in California. Tell us a little bit about this from your perspective.
Thanks, Laverne, and good morning, everyone. It's really great to be with you this morning. And Ryan, thanks for such a good setup. I think that I can provide some particulars from California that sit right in the middle of your larger findings. So let me just begin with California. 6 million students are served in our public schools in 10,000 public schools across 1,000 school districts that include 58 counties. We have 82 institutions of higher education and local education agencies involved in preparing the workforce. And that's kind of the size and scale of what we're trying to do in California. In terms of the educator workforce challenge, In 2022-23, the commission issued 28,000, just over 28,000 initial credentialing documents, of which 14,000, or about 52%, went to fully prepared teachers. 16% of the credentials we issued went to interns who got a 6-week crash course on how to survive the classroom and do your best, and went through a year of on-the-job training, or possibly 2 years of on-the-job training to become fully prepared to do this work. And about a third, just over a third, 37 or 33% of the credentials we issued that year went to people who had emergency permits or some other kind of waiver and no particular focused preparation for the work they were assigned to do. So that's the big problem that teacher shortages present. And this is not just a 22-23 occurrence. This is consistent. This has been consistently the case. Through investment in the past, and hopefully with investment currently and into the future, we have managed to reduce the number of emergency permits we're issuing. We got that down to as low as like 2,000 to 3,000 across the state, which was a significant achievement, but that number is growing again. Each year we are given a projected need for new teachers that's around 17 to 20,000 new teachers. So if we're only credentialing 14,000 fully prepared teachers, there's the gap. There is a gap, and it's persistent. So what is contributing to this gap? We've seen, I think all of us, all the states across the country, have experienced this, that post-COVID, we have seen a great deal more mobility, retirement, and attrition post-COVID. And that is become more pronounced in the most recent years than it even had been prior to that. So for California, and it's when a little bit later I'll talk more about our overall investment strategy. Residencies represent a significant opportunity to grow local capacity to prepare their own teachers and to partner with institutions in their regions to prepare their workforce. And that investment, moving the local school district, a local school perspective from just receivers or recruiters of whoever's available to come and teach in your school into developers, co-developers, and partners in development is a key part of our strategy. It's not just based on when we have funding, we'll do it, but building the infrastructure in California has been a high priority for LEAs to understand their role in partnership with the preparation community to really invest in preparing their workforce. And residencies being everything that Ryan described them to be, the highest, we get the best outcomes with residency programs in California in terms of hiring, in terms of retention, and in terms of a diverse workforce across any of the other pathways that we issue. So this has been a significant investment in California to help us beat back the numbers that have been growing in a way that is not helpful to our overall goals for our students.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Dr. Vixie. Sandy, I want to turn now back to you, Deputy Commissioner Ozer, and ask you if you can just speak in a little bit more detail about the elements of Texas's push for teacher residencies and walk us through how you all have approached both seeding and scaling access across your state.
Thank you. So this has been a long process of, as Texas has learned about residency programs and considered ways to both expand the programs themselves and increase the numbers of districts participating and placing residents and the numbers of residents that are being produced across the state. The first step of this process, as I mentioned previously, really was learning from the great programs that already had residencies in place in Texas and nationally, and working with stakeholders to really understand what are the key components of residency programs that are necessary for their success and would be necessary for us to maintain as we scale to make sure that we're able to see the same results with teachers and with students. So some of those include, and you heard this from Ryan's presentation, those strong partnerships between districts and their educator preparation partners, having governance structures in place, making sure both are really at the table as they're designing these, making sure that field experience and practice is really well structured with job embedded coaching structures, performance gates, and making sure that the training itself is very content specific, practice-based, relevant to the teacher residents. And then of course that there are the right incentives in place, both for the districts, for the candidates, for the educator preparation programs to be able to fund these programs and pay residents during their residency as being key for these programs to be able to recruit candidates and for candidates to be able to actually do these programs. So we codified that vision for what strong residencies look like in partnership with stakeholders and our State Board for Educator Certification, and then also created a vetting process to determine which programs across the state already had and met this bar for residency programs, and funded technical assistance for more programs to go through this transformation process to actually meet this bar of what a strong residency program looks like, and then put those on a vetted list of educator preparation programs. So we currently have 37 programs across the state of Texas that meet this bar for paid residency programs. We then, utilizing the ESSER funding, as was mentioned previously, invested $100 million of our ESSER funding in scaling residency programs. And a lot of that funding actually went directly to districts. And I think that's an important component of this strategy because it ensured that districts were actually invested in participating in the residency program partnerships and knew the requirements of what it meant to be a partner, what it meant to place residents in their classrooms, and how to make sure that they're paying those residents, as well as then requiring districts participate in ongoing technical assistance related to strategic staffing. Because we knew that in order for these programs to be sustainable over time, districts also needed to be seeking strategies to shift their staffing structures to make sure both the residents were having meaningful teaching experiences in classrooms, but also that there could be sustainable funding for residency programs. And then finally, it was really working with our policymakers, our legislators to help build understanding of these programs, measure the success, and be able to share that success as we were growing in Texas. To make sure that there was investment. So that included working with our State Board for Educator Certification, which has now created a residency specific certificate in Texas, which makes it easier for districts to be able to identify which candidates have gone through residency programs, recruit those folks, make sure that we are able to track our residents across the state and have better data on their performance, and creates more of an incentive to say, if you're a candidate and you're going through this higher quality program, you actually get recognized at the end of it with a different level of certificate coming out of the programs. And then working with our legislature to determine and build interest in providing additional state funding over time to replace the ESSER funded investments to make sure that we're continuing to be able to scale these programs across the state.
Terrific. Thank you so much for providing that more detailed insight. As we all know, the devil is always in the details, and implementation and execution are everything. It's one thing to have a good idea in the research, but it's just so helpful to get really tangible insights into how it can be done elsewhere, based on what you've learned and what you've done. Dr. Tanabe, I wanted to ask you about how the policy and investments in residencies at the state level have supported your work on the ground, and what has it allowed you all to do in the service of preparing teachers in your community?
Yeah, thank you for the questions. Let me also begin with a shout out to Dr. Oser and her team, the commissioner, for their attention to residencies, but also their willingness to understand how they were coming online and how they were working, and what the landscape looked like for us in El Paso. That support has been it was profound, and I'll talk a little bit about how we got there. The teacher workforce in El Paso is made up of about 11,000 educators spread over 12 independent school districts, both urban and rural. And the teacher education program at UTEP is responsible for preparing about 70% of the region's entire teacher workforce. Those teachers care for and educate the students who make about 80% of the entire UTEP student body. So it is, in effect, an educational closed loop, where pointing fingers and assigning blame for student outcomes simply makes no sense. So it's this reality that drove our efforts to build our teacher residency. And because we're responsible for preparing the vast majority of the teacher workforce in our region, from the very beginning, we planned for our residency to be built at scale. So we've been engaged in building and scaling the UTEP teacher residency since about 2019, then the pandemic hit. In response, Texas, led by Dr. Oser and her team, established what we call the T-Class Fund. It's Texas COVID Learning Acceleration Support Program. And that funding pushed out ESSER funds to support teacher residencies across the state. Now, because of the closed loop that I described earlier, our design plans were focused on region-wide scale. And that was what we said we needed to do. It provided a foundation for us to take advantage of that funding. But I'll be honest, when we were talking about that design, needing to do it, in the back of my mind was I had no idea how we're going to do this, because it takes a tremendous amount of resources to build that out. So that funding came at the right time, and it really was like rocket fuel for us to take advantage of the work that we'd already been doing in that direction. Last thing, at UTEP, while we managed to put in place a fully scaled, immersive paid teacher residency, and that was done with the help of well-timed state funding and support. While we have demonstrated that this work can be done with high fidelity at scale, what is also a reality is that in many ways, this is a startup. It was built on hustle, on gumption. It was built on rallying the troops, people going over and above in their energy and time and effort across our entire region to make this happen. What we need moving forward is to move from a startup model to a sustained state-supported approach that drives locked-in outcomes over time. I believe we can show that the model works. What it needs is structure provided by our state partners.
Perfect. I love that. Building something that is promising without having an eye towards sustainability is short-sighted. So thank you so much for your thoughtfulness on that topic. Next, I want to turn to Dr. Vixie Sandy again and hear more about California's work to support residencies. Going back to 2018, California has invested heavily in residencies. Dr. Vixie Sandy, can you help us understand the approach California has taken to seeding and growing teacher residencies throughout the state, and what progress the state has made to date in expanding access to paid residencies?
Absolutely, and thank you for the question. So the ESSER funding certainly did help us over the last several years, and I would say in the last decade, the state of California has invested about 1 billion with a B in the development of pathways and grant opportunities to grow its workforce, the goal being to eliminate teacher shortages. And one school of thought would be in California that we don't really have a teacher shortage. We have enough credentialed teachers to staff classrooms 2 or 3 times over, but they won't come. They won't come to all the places that they're needed. So, what do we do about that? And what can we do to build build into the pathways into teaching incentives to go and stay in teaching? So, within that $1 billion in investment, we had a multi-pronged approach. We built some structural infrastructure, if you will, growing. We are primarily in California a post-baccalaureate teacher credentialing state, where most of the states in the country have an undergraduate pathway, and we do have an undergraduate pathway. The vast majority of our candidates do a year of training post teacher preparation, and that's or post their degree. So with that in mind, we did invest a significant amount of money into building our undergraduate pathways, allowing candidates to get early access to schools, to maybe graduate from college, moving into paraprofessional programs or moving into residency programs or moving into some level of introduction to schools that kind of caught their interest and kept them going. So the undergraduate space, we grew. We have about 80 different undergrad pathways that have been approved and growing numbers of candidates who are choosing that at the point of entry into college. They want to be teachers. This pathway helps them get there. We also, in terms of infrastructure, have had for many years in California a classified staff grant program that provides support for them to complete their baccalaureate degree and credential. That program has had sustained funding for the last several years, and a growing number of paraprofessionals and classroom aides have used this particular grant program to earn their credential, and then easily, and I think readily, they can move from the para space into a residency or an intern or a student teaching based program to complete their credentials. So that's some of the infrastructure. I would say the largest section of our segment of our investment has been in teacher residencies. Over 600 million of the $1 billion we've invested have been in residencies. And we have seen since we started this program, we have more than 1,300 candidates who have completed residency programs and are teaching in the field. We see close to 90% hiring and 85% retention rates in our earliest cohorts. We see, as I said, about 70% of these residents are candidates, BIPOC candidates. So we are achieving multiple goals at the same time with a pathway that is demonstrably impacting retention in the field, which I think is probably our biggest problem. As we know better, we do better. So we have been partnering with WestEd in California, who's been doing formative work with us, going deep into the cohorts to get a sense of what's working, what's not working. Every year we review those findings, and we're making adjustments as we can within the law to provide the kind of support that's needed. One of the other investments in infrastructure that we made in California recently was to put funding into the State Teacher Residency Technical Assistance Center, which has a hub and several county office satellite spaces where they are far better equipped than the state of California in Sacramento, a state agency, to get into the local regional areas and start to build and cultivate the partnerships necessary for between LEAs and higher education institutions to get this, the partnership that is necessary to make a residency work. And as I mentioned earlier, moving and expanding the role of the hiring school districts from recruiting and receiving teachers into growing and reaching out in ways that are far more developmental requires some effort. They aren't staffed for that necessarily, and that's one of the key challenges we face in kind of sustainability, is making sure there's sustained staffing to keep the interest, focus, and funding going where it can go. So I think our large strategy has been to seed across the spectrum of teacher recruitment, paraprofessional spaces, early preparation, induction, to sustain the workforce as best we can. The induction space in California is required for teachers to complete a 2-year induction program once they get their first credential. And some of the research on that is pretty compelling about addressing attrition and retention. I've heard Linda Darling-Hammond say in speeches, and Desiree Carver Thomas and others, that if we could cut our attrition rates in half, we would no longer have a teacher shortage. And I think that's worthy of our attention as we go forward, as is the space of apprenticeships. As we see ESSER funding diminishing and going away over time, holding on to infrastructure, as Clifton has said, I think is really quite critical. I think apprenticeships enable us to do a very nice blend with residencies. And apprenticeships are designed to help school districts build and hold on to the infrastructure that they need, that a residency program can fit right into. So that's what we're thinking about in California.
Terrific. Well, it sounds like a very comprehensive design with really careful attention to what's needed to sustain it. I'm just going to turn back to Dr. Tanabe before opening it up to just get a quick response from you, Dr. Tanabe. We heard Dr. Vixie Sandy just now talk about California's efforts to guarantee new teacher mentoring and induction, 2-year induction support, actually. And research has shown that teachers who receive comprehensive mentoring and induction supports are twice as likely to stay in the profession. Can you help us understand how UTEP's residency supports new teacher mentoring and induction, and how these benefits are felt across the partner schools you work in?
Yeah, the work that Dr. Vixie Sandy is leading in California is so on point. We talked about early in our residency design about trying to figure out induction. Induction's tricky, especially for our EPP program, because there are many schools and districts that we serve and we're one program. So we had to do that strategically. Our work on mentorship and induction at UTEP is supported by time-limited federal grant funding. So having said that, it's been incredibly eye-opening and clearly impactful. The core principles are to recognize that success in the first 2 years of teaching is absolutely critical to long-term retention and teacher effectiveness, as was stated, and to act on the reality that effective instructional coaching must be based on real-time and relevant performance data. Relevant and accessible data is at the heart of the model. We talked about this earlier. For us, it includes 2 years of individualized coaching that is strategically aligned with our teacher residency. So both in structure and in process, those students are going through what is effectively a seamless growth model. A UTEP faculty member conducts on-site observations, including 4 walkthroughs with 2 recorded observations a year for our new teachers. New teachers in our program receive individualized coaching and participate in monthly cohorted professional learning workshops based on real-time data. So there's a focus on the issues that they're facing as beginning teachers. And we hold an end-of-the-year recognition event where they get to be recognized for successfully completing this program. They receive a recognition and some pats on the back, certificate of completion. One last point to leave you with. Recently, a school district administrator from one of our partner districts that has the complete structure described the UTEP teacher residency and the induction process as having changed their district's culture with regard to teacher quality. What teacher quality looks like, how it was possible to drive it upward, how retention based on high quality training and induction is a game changer that builds on a culture of teaching excellence. I can't imagine a better kind of, endorsement of the work that we're doing with that specific district. So really proud of the work we've done, and thank you so much for the time to talk a bit about it here.
Terrific. Thank you, Dr. Tanabe. And I love hearing about that culture of teacher quality, because it sets those expectations and also creates a culture for teachers that is affirming and supportive, and that obviously will lead to greater retention. Let's turn now briefly to Q&A from the audience. I have some questions here that the team has been curating. So let me just jump right into it because we have limited time. We've had a request for more specifics on models that support differentiated or strategic staffing. Can you highlight examples or help the audience better understand what that might look like? And feel free, whoever wants to jump in first.
I'm happy to share a little bit about the work in Texas. There was a link that was shared earlier, but I can pop it into the chat here from the Texas Strategic Staffing Supports and Resources site. And this particular page has several of the concrete strategic staffing models that we have been supporting. And this is one of the things that we have been training up our regional service centers to provide this technical assistance to our districts as they're partnering with residencies. And so you can see that there are several ways to set these models up. You can thinking about residents as substitute teachers 1 day a week, residents as long-term substitutes, residents in paraprofessional positions, residents also serving as tutors and supporting enrichment time, residents as release time support, and then also, vacancy models that allow you to close a vacancy and then actually restructure how you're utilizing teachers, including pair teachers, where potentially you've got a resident plus a master teacher or 2 residents with a larger class size with master teacher support, or team teaching models. So those are several of the concrete models that we've been supporting districts with, and based on their unique needs. I'm not sure, I know Dr. Tanabe, there are several districts that you partner with as well who've been pursuing several of these strategies.
Well, Dr. Sandy, I think you were chiming in first.
Oh, no, go ahead, please.
Go ahead, Dr. Tanabe.
Well, all I wanted to add was I think all those models are viable. They're in different configurations in the district partners that we work with. The key, I think, on the ground is to co-design that structure. So it's not a one-size model fits all. It's to co-design with your district partner on where their funding structures lie and how they can best utilize an engagement model with the residency so that some of those costs can be offset by residency engagements in different ways, including things like taking substitute teaching opportunities. So it really is a kind of combined, engaged conversation with the district that I think has led to the best outcomes for our staffing models and for our funding partnerships with our school district partners.
Perfect. I'm gonna, Dr. Vixie Sandy, do you want to go ahead, jump in?
I'll just say ditto to both of those, both Kelsey and Clifton's, or excuse me, Kelvy and Clifton's remarks. I think that one of the big issues with residencies in California is that the amount of funding we have for it that we've dedicated to it is not equal to an entry-level teacher salary. An intern gets an entry-level teacher salary. So for districts who are working to staff their classrooms and thinking about how involved they have to be, an intern is an easier reach. A residency is a higher quality pathway. We are looking for ways to blend these things, and braiding funding has become a term of art in California about, get some to California, the state teacher, Golden State Teacher Grant and some paraprofessional money, and put together all these sources. And then you've got something like an entry-level salary and you don't have to live in your car. You can be a resident. Good, let's go. Great. So some of our differentiated strategies, like, yes, you can be a paraprofessional for 49% of your time, but 51% has to be a resident, or you can be a substitute teacher or whatever. Yes, those opportunities are available to make this more accessible to candidates, but they are also representative of concern that we have in California about the long-term viability of this. We need to get to the level where a resident has what amounts to an entry-level teacher salary in order for this program to get all the traction that it needs to have. So
terrific. Well, I wish we could talk more. There are more questions from the audience, and you all are just an absolute font of knowledge and experience. So thank you, Dr. Tanabe. Thank you, Dr. Vixie Sandy, and thank you, Deputy Commissioner Oser. I'm delighted to have had the opportunity for this to be in discussion with you about this incredibly important topic. But I think I have to turn it back over to Ryan now.
Thank you so much, Laverne, and thank you to the entire panel. And thank you for everyone for joining, for the amazing chat and resources that were being shared. It was great. I really appreciate it, and I wish we did have a second hour, and we can try to set that up another time. But again, we are really appreciative of everyone of their time. And we encourage you to check out all of the resources we shared. We will be following up with a recording And if you are interested, next week we have two amazing panels and conversations coming up on chronic absence and emerging topics in education finance. And please, if it's not too much trouble, there is a survey that'll likely hound you when you try to leave Zoom. If you don't mind answering some of those questions, that can help us continue to calibrate our work. And again, we just really appreciate the chance to work with such great partners, and hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.